In this tutorial, we will be looking at creating a new project using a document template. On the screen, we have the eFORMz composer, and this is the design component of eFORMz, where all of the modification and editing of forms, labels, and reports occurs. And to add a new project, simply put, we can go to the main menu and select File, New Project. Or below that, we can select the New Project icon from the toolbar beneath the main menu. Or we can right-click in the project window and select New Project. Any of those three methods works. And once we have our project, we can right-click that and select Add Page. And we'll go ahead and select OK just to accept the defaults. And to the page, we will right-click that and select Add Form. And here is where you can either use a form template or a document template. If you select from File, you can select a form template that you have created in a publishing tool, such as Word, for example. Or what you can do is you can select blank and build the form in eFORMz using the design tool that the composer has, and that is the document template. And that's what we're going to be doing in this particular video. Once you select OK, the Form Properties dialog will display. And we'll go ahead and just leave everything as is. So we have that there. Why aren't we seeing anything? Well, we haven't displayed the form, and of course we also haven't added data. So to kill two birds with one stone here, let's go ahead and right-click the form and select Display Form and Data. And we will select our source of data from File. And simply navigate to the folder where you have your data, and always selecting files of type as all files here to show all the files. And I have an extensible markup language or XML file for this, and I'll go ahead and select that, and my data and of course my blank form appear. Now, unlike most data types, eFORMz reads extensible markup language or XML in its node tree format. So because of the node tree format, we can read it in like that. And so that has some advantages and disadvantages. The one disadvantage is you have to place every element individually on the form with XML. The advantage is it's very easy to add variables, and of course eFORMz has a lot of functionality that is suited perfectly for XML variables. So, how do we create variables? Well, variables more or less just contain data. That's what a variable is. A variable contains a string of characters or any sort of incoming data so that you can modify those variables in any way, shape, or form once you grab them with functions, and you can place them onto forms and move them around. So they're very valuable. And to create them with XML, you simply right-click the data node and select Add Variable. And the variable dialog will display. It shows you the name, the data node. Transfer method is something you normally won't have to affect. And go ahead and select OK. And we'll see we have a variable appearing. So it's important to, before we continue, to just kind of give a breakdown of what we're looking at here, now that we have each window having a particular element. In the biggest window is the viewer, and of course we have the data coming in here, which is in, again, XML format. We have our blank form down here, so this top pane of the viewer will always show the data. This bottom pane will always show the form. And to the left, we have the project window, and this is going to show everything that we've been doing to this project so far. We have a page, a form, a blank form, and we have a variable. And below that, we have our variables window. This shows all the variables we've picked up, and we've picked up one variable, ship date, and that has the ship date information. So back to the viewer here, we can continue adding variables by just right-clicking and selecting Add Variable on all of these data nodes. And if we just continue to go down the line, we can grab all the variables that we want to use in this particular project and just right-clicking and selecting Add Variable. One thing to note is that, again, if you are not using XML, the way you add a variable is by left-clicking and dragging over a string of characters, right-clicking and selecting Add Variable. And it looks a lot different than what we're doing right here. We have done a video creating a project using a form template, and if you look at that video, we take a look at adding data in that format. So we have all of our data, there we go, picked up now. We have all of our variables, and of course, still nothing showing. So how do we get the variables onto the form? Well, we're going to need to add a document template. So to do that, let's scroll up and right-click our form and select Add Document Component, and we will select a box element. And we're going to be placing our image onto this form first. We have ourselves an invoice, and we want our image looking nice up in the top left here. So we'll uncheck the Within Document and check Absolute Positioning. When checked, this will define the position of the box element by the vertical and horizontal position that you specify, and we're going to leave it unspecified for now. And to the Page drop-down menu, we'll select Every Page. We want our image to display on every page. And we'll go ahead and select OK. So we have our document template added, and we're going to add our image to this box element we have. But first, let's select our document template and select Edit, and we will go to the margins. We want to make sure that our margins are good for this document template. Obviously, the default is no margins whatsoever. Margins are good when you want space from an element to the outside of that element. So whenever you want space around an element, for example, you'll use a margin. Whenever you want space inside of an element, you'll use padding. So padding is typically used with cells, whereas margins are used with elements that are, if you had two boxes and you wanted space between the two boxes, you could most certainly use margins. But that's less common. One area where margins are really encouraged is with the document template. And if you let's give it a value of 400 from the top, this will shift it down 400 decipoints, and we can shift it over, let's say 1,250 decipoints, and we can shift it to the left 100 decipoints. That's going to be a really good offset for our form here. So instead of messing around with the data and form offsets at the bottom, which you certainly can do, and we showed how to do that, me creating a project with a form template video. With a document template, it's very easy to just control the offsets with margins. So we've got that, and we've got our box element here. Let's go ahead and right-click the box and select Add Document Component, Table. And the table properties will display. We'll go ahead and select OK for now. And to the table, right-click that and select Add Row. And we will accept the defaults for now. And to this row, select it, right-click, and Add Cell. And here we will give our cell width of 5,500. And that's because that is the maximum cell width you can give a cell. And I like to use fixed values because it gives you more control over it. You can keep it automatic, but it can get you into a little bit of trouble if you're going to be adding a lot of cells next to one another. It gives you less control. So I recommend using fixed values when you can. And the maximum fixed value you can use with a portfolio style form is 5,500 decipoints. With a landscape style form, that increases to 7,400. But since we're using portrait in this example, we'll keep it at 5,500. And that gives us plenty of space for our logo that we're going to be placing. Before we click OK, let's look at the padding. Let's give it a little padding. We want our logo to have some padding. We'll give it top 10, bottom 10. That gives it just a little bit. And we'll select OK. And to this cell, we can right-click that and select Add Document Component Paragraph. And alignment, you can leave it as is, but just to make things easy, we'll just keep it as a left alignment. I want my image left aligned. And we'll select OK. So how do we add our image? Well, before we do anything to this paragraph, we're going to need to scroll up to our project and right-click the project, select Properties, and select Images. And we see we have an image in here already that I've added earlier. All you can do to add an image is select the Add button, and you select the image and click Open, and it'll bring it in. You can also, once you have the image in here, you can select Edit Scaling, and I have edited the scaling of the image. I've selected Shrink to Desired Size from the drop-down menu, and I've adjusted the width. And if I wanted to make it a little smaller, just select 8. And if I keep Lock Aspect Ratio locked and select OK, and then go back to Edit Scaling, you'll see that the width is lower and the height is lower. So you can adjust the size of your image by shrinking it to the desired size. You can also use fit to desired size, which might make it bigger if you wanted to, but that's not necessarily recommended because that could mess with the resolution a little bit. You can, of course, adjust the resolution here. And we'll go ahead and select cancel and select OK. So we have our image in the project, and that's the recommended way of adding images. You can add them in other ways, and if we right-click the paragraph and select Add Image, you see there are a variety of ways you can add images. Again, I recommend Add Image from Project because once the image is in the project, it's there for life unless you manually remove it. And if you have a lot of images that you're bringing in, that's not necessarily recommended because it'll increase the size of your project file, but normally if you have 4 or 5 tops, you'll be fine. Image from file is not highly recommended because your files could move around a lot, your project can move around a lot, your image files can move around a lot. That's a mess. PDF file, same issue, but again, there could be instances where you would want that to happen, and that's totally fine. The advantage is it's right there, you know where it is, then by all means use it. Image from URL is something that's used exclusively with the document template, particularly with HTML emails, which often have a lot of images, and you just want to bring the image in off your server. Just bring it on in from a URL. You can definitely do that. And then image from component is using a component in a composite data file, and that's not very common, but it's something that you could do. So we're going to select image from project since that's really the easiest method. And from the drop-down menu, we will select the image we brought in, select OK, and there's our image. So we have it right there, and it's looking pretty good. So before we continue, it can get a little confusing in the project window here sometimes when you have all of these elements and they all look the same, right? So one thing we have is descriptions. So if we right-click our box and select Edit and select Description, we can add a description to this element. And I'm going to add logo because this is what we're doing with this box. We're placing the logo. So every time that if you want to look at your logo and find where your logo's at, maybe you wanted to change something with this element, you can find it easily by just looking over here and seeing, oh, that's my logo box. So that has a very, very good advantage. All right. So we have our logo done. If you want to collapse or expand anything, you can select the collapse expand icon here to the left of every element. We want to collapse this box for now. So we have that. Let's go ahead and add another box where we're going to place some of these variables we created earlier. Like we said, we want to place these. So how do we place them? Well, we can right-click our document template and select Add Document Component and Box. And we're going to make sure that this is an absolute position box, but this time we're going to position this a ways to the right. And 3,700 decimal points should be good. Vertical position, we'll give it a vertical position of 350. That'll move it down a little bit. And we want this on every page. So it's important to look at all of the options we have here. First page means that the element will show only on the first page. Last page means it'll only show on the last page. Nth page means that if you define a page in the box to the right, let's select that just to show you, you can see there's nth page. So if I do it page 5, nth page 5, it'll show only on page 5. But obviously I don't want that. I want it on every page. So we'll show up on every page and go ahead and select OK. And to this box, since we're going to be adding all of our information up at the top, it'll probably appear over here in the far right of our form. I'm going to edit it and give it a description now just to make things easy. And I'm going to say this is our header. So this is going to be our invoice header. And we'll select OK. So we know now that this is our header, which is going to have, not all, but a good portion of our variables, a good portion of our information is going to be placed in this area of the project. So we have that. Let's go ahead and right-click the header and select Add Document Component, and we'll select Table, and we'll go ahead and select OK. And to this table, we'll right-click that, and we will select Add Row, and we'll leave it as is, keep the row as it is. And to this row, we're going to add our invoice number. So let's go ahead and right-click the row and select Add Cell. And we want a fixed width again. And we'll give it a fixed width of 800. That's pretty good because we're going to key in invoice number, just a text value, as somewhat of a header itself. And we will give it some padding. I don't like to do a lot of padding. You may like to do a lot of padding. It depends. We have people here at Minisoft who love to use a lot of padding. There's some who like no padding at all. It kind of just depends on your personal preference. A little padding usually is good. We'll go ahead and select OK. And so we have that. Let's right-click the cell and select Add Document Component and Paragraph. And here we can adjust the alignment. I want this to be centered. We'll go ahead and select OK. And to this paragraph, we'll right-click that and select Add Text, Text Value. And let's go ahead and enter in invoice number. We'll abbreviate it to make it easy. And there we go. So a couple things here. First of all, this doesn't look good. I mean, I'll be perfectly honest. This isn't looking so hot. So we can adjust the font either on this individual element by selecting it and selecting Edit and Font. But I actually don't like this font at all. I want to change it completely. There's two ways of doing this. One method is just changing it on the document template by selecting it, selecting Edit, after you right-click and selecting Font. And you can change it here. But if you notice, the font values that the document template is getting are the automatic values set for this particular form. So let's go ahead and cancel out of that and let's just change the form font. And by doing that, we can right-click the form and select Properties and Font. And here, you can change the font from the drop-down menu in Courier. And I don't particularly like Courier. It's not that attractive. I like Arial better. Works with most printers. And I don't want the height to be that big. I want to change it and make it a little bit smaller. And there you go. And do we want to adjust all of them? Yes, we do. There we go. So we have a new font here. And I like the way that's looking. So if we scroll back down and we select right-click and select Edit and Font on our document template, you'll see it's still automatic, but the font is Arial and the height is 10. So that's probably the best way to do it globally. If you'd rather not change the font on the form and just do it on the document template, you can uncheck automatic and change it. And you can change the font on pretty much any element in the document template as well individually. Or you can change it on the component itself. So you could change the font on the cell, and everything in that cell will have that particular font. Or you could just change it on the element like we showed, edit that, and select font. So there's a lot of ways you can adjust the font, either globally within the project, or on a particular form or document template, or more individually on a particular component or element. So I like that font, but I kind of want some borders. So let's go back up to our cell here and select the cell, right-click it, and select Edit, and select Borders. So you can add borders to cell elements in the document template. And this is something that is really nice for just the look and feel. And we'll go ahead and select the separate borders. And I want a top border, put a thickness of 5, and select Solid from the drop-down menu. And we'll go ahead and give it a left border as well of Solid, and we'll select 5. And there we go. We have ourselves a border. By itself, that doesn't look too good, but we're going to add the invoice number variable to the right of that. And so let's go ahead and do that. Now, this can obviously get really repetitive, adding cells, paragraphs, and various content elements. So one cheat code, if you will, or a trick, is if you select the element you want, and let's say you're just going to make another cell in a paragraph, well, why not just select the element, and then you select it, and while you're selecting it, select Control on your keyboard, and release, and there you have it, another cell, and it's the exact same, you're just copying. So if you ever want to copy an element and then change it, that's one way of doing it. It's just basically selecting it, selecting Control, and dragging. It makes things move a little bit quicker. But obviously we don't want the cell to be exactly the same. We don't want this content, so I'll go ahead and remove that by right-clicking and selecting Remove. And yes. And you know, obviously I want a border to the right of this cell, and I don't want the cells to be the same size. I kind of want this cell with the invoice number variable to be a little bit bigger. So let's go ahead and right-click our cell and select Edit and General. And let's give this a fixed width of 1000, make it a little bit bigger. And on the borders, let's go ahead and give it a border to the right by selecting Solid and a thickness of 5 just to keep everything consistent. And that makes it a little bit thicker. And you see, you know, you can't really tell that there's a border there, but if you zoom in, there you see it. And that's something that I recommend doing. Not all the time with a document template, it'll look like you did something and then nothing happened. Well, just make sure you zoom in or zoom out, and that'll give you a better understanding of what you've done, because at a higher lens, you'll be able to see things better. So just a heads up there, another kind of helpful tip there. And you know, I like this and everything, but I don't really like the way it's looking. I just don't like the look of this. So before I add my variable, I'm going to go back to this cell up top here, and I'm going to right-click it and select Edit, and select General, and I'm going to change the background color. I want this to, let's give it a gray color. So let's uncheck Automatic and select the color stripe here. And you know, a real easy way of doing this is just selecting a swatch. So I'm going to select this kind of darker gray here and select OK. And there we go, I've changed that. But I don't really like the black text with that gray. So I am going to select my element, right-click the text I did earlier, and select Font. And I'm going to keep the font the same, but you know, I'm going to uncheck this text color, and I'm going to make it white. I like that a little bit better. That pops a little bit more. So we have that, and that looks pretty good. And let's go ahead and add our variable to this cell below it by selecting the paragraph and right-clicking and selecting Add Text, Variable Value, and select the invoice number variable. And there we have it, and select OK, and there it is.